And welcome back, everyone, to its last call. Last call of the alcohol, only on the lastcallpodcast.com. And joining me here on location, well, the Buccaneers had a great draft, and this man's going to break down schedule, talk about their release video, which still is pretty damn funny, even after seeing it 5 or 7 times. I give you insider extraordinaire and Buccaneers analyst. I give you it's JT Jeff Olson. So, Jeff, let's start off here with all right. I know if somebody said to you that this guy would drop, you would probably say, "No, you're just lying your rear end off." But that's right, Reuben Bain, the first round draft pick. Were you shocked that he dropped to the Buccaneers? And did you, if somebody said, if they mocked him to you before this, would you have just said you're a goddamn, like fantasy drafter?
Yeah, I was totally shocked. I mean, running so many mocks leading up to the draft, it almost never happens where he's available at 15. He's taken by Dallas at 12 or the Saints or the Chiefs or I mean, really there are half a dozen teams that could have and probably should have taken him. Totally surprising to see him fall that far. And I know the Bucs had been interested in moving back. They were trying to get moved back into the mid 20s and get Mesidor, but him falling where he did, that totally changed their approach to the draft. That's the kind of player you just can't pass up. So, yeah, totally shocking. Wouldn't have believed it if you told me it was going to happen. But I'm really glad it did.
Do you worry about the arms? Because that's the thing we heard leading up to the draft. Well, he has under 30, not only 33-inch arms, but 32-inch arms. Like, hey, it's 30, almost 30 inches or 31 inches, or depending on who measured it here. Either way, he doesn't have the long reach that people like. So, should that be a concern? That it's like, okay, he might get, manhandled by longer, limb tackles.
It's not a concern for me. He was my third ranked player going into the draft. And, the reason I don't worry about it is because his film says it's not a huge problem. I mean, he pushes people around, he gets into their chest. He's so fast and explosive and bendy around the edge. He can win with speed, and he's so strong. He can win with power. You don't see guys like him succeed in the NFL, but I'd also say there aren't guys who have short arms that are this talented. I mean, he's a rare talent, like a Jared Verse and Aiden Hutchinson type of talent. And if you are that kind of talent, I think you're just going to succeed at the next level based on your work ethic, your talent, not necessarily your arm length, because you dominate with short arms at every level and should continue in the NFL.
Why did he fall? Because I know that's been on your mind. Because as you said, guys like this usually don't fall. You thought, okay, Dallas would take him, Miami would have taken him, the Chiefs would have taken him. I get the Chiefs saying, well, we really need a cornerback, and this draft wasn't great with about cornerbacks, which we'll get to later on. But from what you've heard, like, why did he fall all the way to the Buccaneers?
I think part of it was teams drafting for need, who was the right fit for a team. The Rams drafting a quarterback, they wanted a quarterback. Would Bain have fit them? Absolutely, but that's not what they wanted to do. The Cowboys, they could have absolutely used Bain. He would have been a great fit for them. But Caleb Downs, I mean, that was my top ranked player in the class, so I can't be too mad at that. The Saints got the best wide receiver in the draft. They wanted to go offense. They have an offensive minded coach. I mean, really, it was just teams looking in another direction. And there's probably two, three, four, five, six teams who said, okay, we could take this guy or we could take Bain. And they all just happened to go with the other guy they liked. And it's just one of those fluky things. And I'm sure the arm length was a part of it because he would be an outlier in that way. But I think every team, starting with the Jets, strongly considered Bain.
When you did your scouting, I guess this is the question of it. A lot of people don't ask. Like, did he ever face though like an elite level offensive tackle? Like you see all the top tackles in the draft, and none of them were in the ACC. I don't think any of them played Miami. So could that be a concern where it's like, okay, yeah, he's good, but who did Miami play that had like legit offensive tackles that you would say are first or second round talents?
That's a really good question, actually. I'd have to go back and check my notes for what games I evaluated. I know he put Blake Miller in a blender, and he got drafted mid first round. I think he went 17 to the Lions. So I know he absolutely tore him apart. Once he got into the playoffs, I know he really did a lot of damage to that Texas A&M offensive line with Chase Basantis, who was a really good guard. Bain is an exterior player, he's an edge, but he plays on the inside too. You can move him all around the defensive line, and he really tore Basantis up. Same with the left tackle, Kuhn there. Was it Kuhn? Kuhn?
Tracy, yeah,
Anyway,
they've said that he's more of a guard than a tackle. So, I mean, Miller, I give him, but as you and I have talked about, like Clemson, just you need to ask like what the hell happened with Clemson. That's a whole different story for a different day. We'll get to that guy, get to that almost even later in this draft, but with the Demonte K part. But I mean, again, like if you look here, I guess if you're a team and you're the Buccaneers, like okay, how will we do against guys who are 6'6", 6'7", 34-inch arms, and he can't just maul. Like, is there a small concern? Like, all right, well, this isn't college. This isn't, Old Miss or Ohio State. These are like all pro tackles you'll take on a constant basis.
there is some concern. I won't pretend like length and reach doesn't matter, but the Bucs have had success drafting short-armed players. Keionte is incredibly disruptive at defensive tackle when he's healthy. Luke Gedeke fell in the draft, thought he was going to be a guard, 32-inch arms. He's one of the best right tackles in the game. And I really believe you can compensate for arm length because all arms bend at the elbow. And if you're attacking someone in their elbow area, you're putting moves on them, you're using your hands the way you should, you can definitely beat players who have longer arms. Even though they have that advantage, you can neutralize that advantage by attacking them at their joints. So there's a little bit of concern, but he can just do it in so many ways. He does it with technique, he does it with skill, he does it with power, he does it with speed, he does it with bend. If he only gets one sack a game, that's one of the best seasons in NFL history. I
Yeah.
mean, 17 sacks a game, a year. That's pretty good. So he only has to burn them once to be great, and I think he's going to get the better of tackles consistently at this level.
So what should be realistic expectations? Because I mean, you say one sack game, and Tampa Bay fans will probably start pants off, dance off. Next thing you know, start going Reuben Bain, Hall of Fame. Like, let's hold that back. I mean, for what he is, and for what Tampa Bay does, and for what Todd Bowles likes to do defense, like what should be like realistic expectations for Reuben Bain in his first season?
I want to temper it a little bit because there is going to be an adjustment period to the league, learning the speed, learning the defense. But I do think 7 to 9 sacks is a realistic expectation for year one. And I think he's going to raise the floor of everyone else on that defensive line. You know, he's going to chase quarterbacks into the arms of Vita Vea. You're going to look into the chip on Bain, and that's going to set up Yaya Diaby for a sack on the other side. So I think his presence is going to be massively felt on that defensive line. But it's hard to get sacks in the NFL. So if he gets anywhere in that 7, 9, 9.5 range, I think that'd be a really successful rookie season.
Could he play linebacker? Because again, this he is, as you said, he's not the biggest guy. You already have Vita Vea at nose tackle. You have, of course, Kalijah Clancy from 2023. He's one of the first round picks. You also have Elijah Simmons as nose tackle. I mean, do they do a 4-3, a 3-4? Like where, if you're Todd Bowles, do you play around with Reuben Bain and just go, okay, well, you're an edge slash elephant linebacker, and I'm just going to use you like Miami did and try to move you all over the place.
Yeah, I think Todd Bowles will get creative with him. I think if you're playing him as like a linebacker, I think that's going to be occasional because the last thing you want Ruben Bain doing is dropping into coverage. He'll do it occasionally. I mean, Todd Bowles loves to drop his edge players into coverage, but you'll do that with Yaya Diaby. You'll do that with David Walker, guys who are a little more nimble, a little bit more of that outside linebacker in a 3-4 kind of mold. I see Bain as more of a hand in the dirt edge rusher. He can rush from a 2-point stance fine, but you don't want him doing anything else in that kind of linebacker role. So I expect a little bit of outside linebacker work, a little bit of defensive tackle work, but mostly he's going to be playing four eye, five tech, rushing the passer, blowing up the tackle, um, and using him in creative ways, but keeping the first thing first and letting him do what he does best.
We go to the next pick, which, if Bain was a bit controversial, this feels very safe. This feels like Todd Bowles pounding the table, going, "I want this. I don't need this. I want this." Uh, Josiah Trotter, a linebacker from Missouri, the thumper and part of the Trotter family, is now a Buccaneer. It just feels apropos that as Levante David is now retired and gone from the Buccaneers, they get a guy who basically has that same sort of mentality, aggressiveness, and just playmaking ability. He's a little bit shorter, but is this basically like Todd Bowles' like Christmas wish, where I want a guy who can replace Levante David? This is my clone. This is the younger version of him.
I don't know that anyone could place Levante David. You're talking about one of the greatest linebackers in NFL history. So I don't want to say he'll replace Levante David, but with that said, linebacker has been this team's biggest weakness over the last 2 or 3 years. So getting a young, talented linebacker like this, it is a breath of fresh air. It's very much needed. You know, Levante David been on the downside of his career the last few years, kind of fought through injury this final year. And then his running mate has just been a mess between Servassier Dennis and KJ Britt. It's just been a revolving door next to Levante David. So getting some stability there with Trotter, it's awesome. I love to see it. And I love his mindset. The Bucs really wanted to get meaner this offseason, more physical, more aggressive, more in your face attitude. And Trotter definitely brings that on the field. He will blow up a guard to where the guard does not want to go up to that second level. And you do not see that a lot with these prospects. It's all about speed and space for linebackers at college. You don't see a lot of guys like Trotter who want to do the dirty work, who are good at that kind of thing. You can trust him to meet a fullback in the A gap and just blow up a play, and I love that. You have to compliment him with a more of a coverage specialist, which they have in Alex Anzalone, who they got in free agency. But for what Trotter is, he's a thumper, he's a smart player, he's a young player. I really like the addition in terms of the fit with what they have on defense.
How much did it help him with the Buccaneers? That is the bloodline. It is his father was an NFL linebacker, Jeremiah Trotter. His brother, the older brother, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., is an NFL standout linebacker. Like so, there he knows exactly how to play the position, what it entails. He's probably seen and hung out with his father, so he knows exactly what a professional linebacker is supposed to be like. If you were Todd Light, like what was this the big selling point? Like I got a guy who can plug and play. I got a guy who I don't have to worry about. He's going to have his head up his rear end. He actually knows how to be a professional, even though he's still a college player.
Oh, I think it helps a lot. I mean, you just listen to him talk, and he sounds like a professional coming into the league, even though he only played 2 years at the college level. He is mature beyond his years. And I know there's a relationship there with the Trotter family, played in the league. Everyone knows Jeremiah Trotter. Um, I think that certainly helps, especially with the success they've had with Antoine Winfield Jr. They've seen what those bloodlines can lead to. And not that that's a guaranteed pass where someone's going to be a good pro, but they know what it's supposed to look like. They were raised learning how to play the position. They've watched film since they were in middle school, like a professional. So all of that is part of it. And I think it's going to make him successful sooner rather than later. Again, he will have some growing pains as a rookie. All rookies do, but this is a high floor player in my opinion because of that mental aspect of his game.
So, what are realistic expectations for Jeremiah Trotter? Because people are going to go same thing. Hey, rookie of the year candidate, start him right away. He's going to he'll take to this like a duck to water. And as he said, he was in a loaded Missouri defense. I mean, you had two edge players, one of them who went the second round in Zion Young. You'll have Damon Wilson, the second who transferred to Miami. They'll probably be a first round pick. You had Chris McClellan, who was, and another NFL draft starter here. What are realistic expectations for Trotter that We're not going, oh yeah, he's gonna, be put too high, and he starts going, okay, this might be a bit too much.
I do think he'll be a day one starter, because of all of those things. Um, I don't I don't want to set the bar too high for him in terms of production because he's not the fastest linebacker. He's more of a box linebacker. He's not a slug out there. He'll be able to protect the edge and get to the sideline, but he's not that lightning fast sideline to sideline speed kind of guy who's going to get you 120 tackles as a rookie. I'd say he'll be probably more in that 90-ish range, 80-ish range in terms of tackles. He's going to do a lot of the dirty work and let other players clean up tackles. If he could be solid in coverage, that's kind of big question mark with him is his coverage ability, then I think that would be a huge win. I mean, he doesn't have to be Fred Warner out there, but if he could be better than KJ Britt, that would be a plus. I think that's an expectation that's fair of him. He is athletic enough to do that as a rookie. And I think the Bucs are really going to utilize him in the blitzing game. I think that's an underrated part of his game coming out of college. Todd Bowles loves to bring pressure and different looks. So if he can get 3, 4 sacks, then I think that'd be a really successful rookie season for him.
I was gonna say he is a downhill sort of, or straightforward linebacker. He's not going to go sideline to sideline with speed, but he is just like a bowling ball coming down the middle. So if you're, Todd Bowles, do you use him a lot like what Spags does with some of his cornerbacks? You just screaming off the edge, up the middle, just send him like kamikaze style and have him be that designated blitzer.
Yeah, I think he's going to be really good at that. He's got a really natural feel of how to slip under blockers and get around guys, which I think is, he's so good at blowing up blockers. You don't really talk about how he just slides past blockers when it's that right moment to do so. So I think that's really going to translate well in terms of his pass rush game.
So this is the enigma. Is he a NFL player who just fell through the cracks and he'll be a star because of the talent, or is he a guy who dominated at Georgia State because big fish, small pond, and this is sort of your next, bust wide receiver? The jury's out. So first, what's your take on Ted Hurst? Because you were at the combines and the workouts and you scouted him. Like, where does he stand on your big board coming into this draft?
I think he was kind of floating around that late second, early third for me. So where the Bucs got him, I thought was a pretty good value. And your question, is he a big fish in a small pond or is he a real legitimate NFL player? I think both. I think he was able to dominate his level of competition because he was just way more talented than anyone else around him. But I also think he could have been more dominant if he had a better quarterback throwing him the ball. I mean, he had 3 different quarterbacks start for his team last year, and he made up 1/3 of their entire team passing yards. Get this guy a legitimate thrower of the football, and he could have been fantastic. You put him in Oregon or you put him in LSU, and this could have been an All-American. I think he has that kind of talent, and I think he had a chance to showcase it at the Senior Bowl where he looked great. He was making over-the-shoulder catches. His size, his speed, you just can't replicate it. I mean, it's a rare ability being that big and that fast, and that translates. Now, of course, he has to be more than that because there's been plenty of Kevin Whites out there, Darius Hayward Bays, you name the big fast receiver, they don't always work out. But I think what's going to separate him is I think he has the potential to be a really, really good route runner because not only is he fast, but he can also stop on a dime. And that's going to really open up the comeback kind of routes. And, he keeps the defense on their heels and it allows you to make those cuts and create separation because you have to compensate for that kind of speed. He's running a 4.4 flat at 6'3", 6'4". You can't help but respect it.
He's on the thinner side, though. That's the one worry. Like Mike Evans was a big dude. It's about 6'5", 220, and he could take hits. He's probably caught up to him a bit, but he could still take hits. Ted Hurst is like clocked in at about 6'4", 206 pounds. Like, he is a thin guy. So I know you always worry, what happens when he gets to the NFL and all of a sudden you have NFL safeties who are just coming over the middle and rocking you. You have very physical corners who like to jam you a bit. Like, do you worry that he might need a redshirt year in terms of like he won't hit his stride because he still needs to put on weight, put on muscle, and get used to a very physical NFL rather than who he was facing at Georgia State, where he was the big, big bad bully.
Yeah, I think to a degree. He's going to be the Bucks' fourth option at wide receiver this year. So I think with Chris Godwin and Emeka Ibuka and Jalen McMillan, it's going to naturally set up for him to be a redshirt, which is good because he does need to refine some of that more technical part of his game. He can't just rely on his tools. But I do think he's going to be for as a deep threat, as someone who can move the chains. I do think he's ready to roll pretty much right now. But he's not going to be able to take those big hits, go over the middle. That's just not who he is. He's that outside, stretch the field, play off what he can do kind of player. And that's fine for right now. I mean, he'll continue to develop. And like you said, he'll get bigger and stronger and more refined. And in a year or two, when he's asked to be more of a true number one or a true number two, he'll be ready to assume that position. And, you know, 2 years from now, that core of Hurst and Ibuka and McMillan projects to be really, really good. They're all different types, they're all different styles, they all have different strengths, they can all play off each other really well. So, yeah, I think this will be more of a redshirt year, even though I do think he'll get a chance to contribute, probably give you a decent rookie season. But I wouldn't be placing any long shot bets for rookie of the year on offense.
Got into your head. Who would you have taken, Ted Hurst or Chris Bell? Because that's you. That's the
Oh,
debate
that's a
there.
tough
Like,
one.
and then there's some people like should have taken Chris Bell. He's a proven guy. He can hand. He is basically an AJ Brown clone. There's others who say no, no. Look at Ted Hurst. He just looks like he walked out of a mad scientist wide receiver room. What would you have done if you were the Bucks?
I think just on my own personal preference, I probably would have gone with Hurst. I just personally don't love the archetype of a AJ Brown, who is not the most explosive player. He's 6'2", he's got 220, he's got a thick build to him, which is great, but he doesn't have that explosion to him. Bell, he has great build up speed. He's super fast, but it takes him a little while to build up that speed. So he has to catch it, get a step, and then he can start to run away from you. Where Ted Hurst can just blow right past you. You know exactly what he can do, how fast he is. He doesn't need but a second to get up to speed. So I think for that reason, I just prefer that prototype of wide receiver. But I think Bell's really good. I don't think he could go wrong either way.
So now the question falls on, as you said, its development. And for the Buccaneers, can Brian McClendon get him up to speed? I mean, usually he's had guys who come from at least big four power conferences. They hit the ground running. He's not that. So, what is your faith in McClendon in terms of developing him to be a wide receiver, NFL caliber wide receiver sooner rather than later?
I feel good. I trust McClendon. I think he's done a really nice job since coming to Tampa. Um, And he has really developed the guys he's had, even though they've been different prototypes. Jalen McMillan, he went to Washington. He was a big school, but he was also the third Washington wide receiver drafted in that class. So it's not like he was, this top 10 pick who, has been hit the ground running. He was the third round pick who has developed nicely, and he's a playmaker, and he's got, I think, 6 or 7 touchdowns as a rookie, and unfortunately missed most of last year. But I mean, when he's on the field, he's a difference maker. So, to be able to grow and improve like he did his rookie year, I think reflects really well on McClendon. And, Abuka, we knew what he was. He was incredibly polished. So, I won't give too many kudos for that. But how Tez Johnson came along last year as a 155-pound wide receiver. I think he contributed 4 or 5 touchdowns. So it's been a really good start in Tampa for him. I'm really impressed with what he's done. And I think Hurst is just a bigger talent to work with than those guys. So I expect him by the end of this year to show flashes like this could be that guy moving forward.
All right, so this is one more polarizing players in terms of there's some guys I know who love Keionte Scott. They were pounding the table going, hey, you got to draft this guy, you got to draft this guy. There's others who are like, I don't know if he has the NFL speed. I don't know if, he can play more man to man. He benefited from a Miami defense that pressured quarterbacks constantly. So let's start off first. What was your take on Keionte Scott? Did you like him? Were you in the pro Keionte Scott crowd, or were you in the I don't know if he's that good enough crowd?
Yeah, I'm definitely in the pro Keionte Scott crowd. I had him ranked higher than both Hurst and Trotter, so to get him after those guys in the fourth round, I thought was awesome value. And we've seen this before. Nickels tend to fall, and I think Scott is just a true nickel, if not a safety. So he's not that traditional corner teams are looking for. But the same was said about Brian Branch when he came out, and now he's a stud. It's surprising to no one because he was always a stud. It's just nickel players like that tend to drop. Tyke Smith, very similar. He had a Pro Bowl caliber year last year, and he fell to the third round as a rookie. So these types of players fall more than they should in a league that's typically playing 70% nickel packages. So I love the value. I love the player. I think he's a slam dunk pick.
What are the drawbacks to him? Because as we said, with Reuben Bain, it was the arm length. With Jeremiah Trotter, it was the speed. With Ted Hurst, it's is he ready yet? So for Keionte Scott, Pete fans who are over the moon, like what should they be concerned of? Like what gives you concern in terms of well, this could be sort of his Achilles heel.
So I do think he's a better zone player than man. I think he does have some flaw in his man-to-man coverage game. I don't think it's an athletic issue because I think his speed is really good. I just think if you leave him exposed on an island man-to-man too long, he's going to get beat, which I think is the case for a lot of nickels out there. But I think everything else, his run defense, his blitzing ability, his zone coverage, his playmaking, it's all really, really good. So you just can't leave him on an island for extended periods of time. And if you do that, then I think he's going to be a really good player in the NFL.
So does he fit what Todd Bowles wants to do? Like when I know in the past Bowles has been a guy who he can use whatever he has. So if he wants to do a blitzing style, he'll do that. If he needs to do zone coverage, he can do that. Doesn't want to, but he'll do it. With Scott, like where is he? As you said, he's not a man-to-man guy. He's more of a zone. So is he a nickel? Is he a safety for Todd Bowles? Like if you're Todd Bowles, what are you looking at Keionte Scott and going, this is where I'm going to put you?
Yeah, he's definitely going to be a nickel next year. He's probably going to be the starting nickel. And I think he's a great fit because Todd Bowles loves to blitz his nickel. I think Antoine Winfield did really well coming as a blitzer when he played there. Tyke Smith, the same thing. Last year, Jacob Parrish. It's been a revolving door of nickels, but they've all done really well under Todd Bowles because he can get them after the quarterback. And I think Keionte Scott's going to be really, really good at that. I think he had five set sacks as a corner nickel safety player last year. So he's so explosive. I think that's going to be a perfect fit for Todd Bowles. His run defense is stellar, and Bowles has kind of trended more towards zone coverage in recent years. He likes to bring a lot of pressure, but on those third downs, third and long, he likes to play a little bit more off coverage. He likes to be a little bit more conservative. And I think that's going to work really well for Scott because that's really what he's best at. Sit back, let them throw the ball his way and either make a play on it or blow up a receiver. I think that's going to be an ideal fit for what Todd Bowles likes to do right now.
How much of a selling point for the common denominator for both Scott, Bain, and Trotter, as I know you pointed out, was they are kind of mean. They really they will fight, hit, and scratch, claw, and bring an attitude to your defense. I know you said last year that was missing a bit in Tampa. Do you think that was the big sell for your Bulls in terms of this is what I want? I want good players. I also want guys who are going to literally turn this into a street fight. I want to make offenses, fear going over the middle, going deep, and having to worry about getting just mugged.
Yeah, I think that was definitely a selling point. I think it's fair to say that the Bucs defense was soft last year, and they wanted to change that. They wanted to get back to what they were doing back in their Super Bowl window when they had Ndamukong Suh and Jason Pierre-Paul and just mean dudes who can blow up the run. And they attacked that in the offseason, getting guys like Ashawn Robinson, who is just a mean dude in his own right, and a good run defender. Bain, he's all business. He's a mean dude on the field. Trotter, he seems like a really nice guy, but he plays like he's a mean guy. And then Scott's the same way, super mature, super nice, comes off like a real pro already. But you put him on the field and this dude's a pit bull. So yeah, I think that was definitely a big factor. They're trying to get tougher, they're trying to get more physical, they're trying to get meaner and bring that dog back to this defense.
So what are the realistic expectations for Keionte Scott? Because again, he's in Florida, so there's going to be a lot of Tampa, Miami fans who are going to look and go, he's going to just pick it up. He's going to be the next stud cornerback because hey, it's the turnover chain. It is the U. They always produce. What's realistic for him is in terms of is he going to be Terrell Buckley or even Trent McDuffie, or is he going to be a nice nickel that there's going to be times you're going to love him and times you're going to go, oh my God, this guy's really needs to just be more controlled. God damn it.
I think he's probably more towards the McDuffie end. I don't want to say he'll be Trent McDuffie because I don't want to put Pro Bowl expectations on as a rookie. But I think he could possibly be in those conversations by the end of the year just because this is someone who can turn the ball over. This is someone who's going to get a lot of sacks. He's a playmaker. And then his run defense, I think, is going to really impress people this year. Definitely think he's plug and play starter, and I really think he's going to be maybe the Bucs' best or second best corner this year in a room that has a lot of talent. They've invested a lot into the position in recent years, but I think Scott is going to just hit the ground running and absolutely be an impact player day one.
So this is the pick I'm guessing, like every pick, like I love this guy. I love this guy. Hey, this guy here, ready to take him home. Jeremiah Trotter, he's going to be part, of the family here. The Monte K part, I'm guessing, is the one pick, Jeff. You're like, oh, all right. I trust you, Todd, but I don't really see this. So break it down because there was some Bucs fans like, why did you draft a guy who looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane? He's not that good. Why couldn't we get somebody better? So talk Bucs fans off the edge if you can, or are you like, yeah, Todd, I think I love you, but you might have missed a boat on this one.
Yeah, I think Capehart was in the tier of players I was looking at, although not my preferred player that I thought they would target. He's super athletic, just prime time athlete for the position. He's a good run stuffer. He's a good space eater. But I wish he was a little bit better with his hands. You definitely see occasional flashes where he can just blow up the pocket, get to the quarterback, be disruptive, and play like that athlete he tested as. But I think more times than not, he's physically strong, which kind of goes in that same theme we were just talking about. But he doesn't always get off blocks the way you want him to. He isn't much of a pass rusher. He's a depth space eater. Kind of give Ashawn Robinson a break. Can play some 4 eye into that defensive end, and you won't lose a ton in terms of run defense. But he's just kind of I don't want to call him a warm body on defense, but he's a depth role player. He's a one trick pony and you like the trick, but don't expect much more than that from him, even though he tested like a guy who should be dominating.
Like that, I get why. Because again, you look at him and he fits. He is your prototype in terms of size. He's 6'5", 315, 320. I'm guessing if you're Marcus West, you're going, I can't fix him. I can figure it out. I know I can. A guy that athletic can't be just that bad. But at the same time, and if you were in charge and you had your druthers between, Demonte Capehart or a Zane Durant from Penn State, who would you have taken? The guy who's more of a producer, who has more proven results, or Capehart, who it is, it's yeah, I know this is a boat, but this Demonte Capehart, just like Family Guy, it's the box. It could be anything. Could also be disappointment, but it could be anything.
Between those two, I probably would have still gone Capehart because I was a little bit lower on Durant, and the Bucks already have their share of undersized defensive tackles like that. With Cansey and Elijah Roberts, who kind of transitioned from an edge in college to a defensive lineman in the NFL. But I would have preferred a guy like Rayshon Benny from Michigan, who kind of plays that same role. I think he's a little bit more skilled. And the guy I really liked was Brandon Cleveland, who I think went in the 6th round to the Raiders. He's a good run defender. I think he's a better athlete on the field than Capehart was. I think he's better with his hands. He's got more pop at the point of attack. So there are definitely guys who I would have preferred over Capehart. Um, but I won't sneeze too much at a fifth round rotational tackle.
How much for you is it also, it's the elephant in the room that nobody's been able to answer for every Clemson player? You played awful in 2025. Like nobody has an answer for why. So for you, I mean, when you're doing your scouting, like how much did that go into your mind? Like they can't be this bad. They were in the national playoffs the year before. What what happened? Was it just voodoo curse? The personnel changes scheme? Did Dabo piss everybody off by telling racist jokes? Like how did they play this goddamn bad?
It's something that they have to sort out during the interview process because when a team that talented underperforms by that much, it says something to the culture and it says something about the try and did this team quit? Did they get too full of themselves? Because it was a mental thing. There was not a talent thing. They were just so talented between the quarterback and the wide receivers and the line and the defensive line. And there was just talent all over the field. Terrell getting drafted. And, I expected this team to contend for the national championship going into last year, and they just did not even come close. They were just dead on arrival. So, you feel like that's a culture thing. And is this guy, complacent? Is he comfortable in a losing culture? Because obviously not too much happened that changed that lit a fire under this team. Um, so you really have to get to know the player as an individual in these kind of situations. Are you someone who's going to roll over and die, or are you someone who's going to do anything possible to win? Are you going to be working harder as things get tougher, or when things get hard, will you quit? So I can't answer that question. That's something every team had to figure out for themselves, whether it's Blake Miller or Avion Terrell or Kate Klubnik, whatever prospect you're looking at, everyone's thinking the same thing. How did you let this talented team fail like it did? And everyone owns that. No one's exempt from it. You just have to let the character speak for itself and let their film speak for itself and kind of make your best judgment from there.
Does it for you? Does it give hope that you figure Vita Vea and Cansey will literally make sure that he doesn't feel, as you said, sort of entitled and sort of complacent? But there are enough leaders in the Bucs defense where if he does this, they will grab him by the scruff of the neck. Go, no, 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 you don't do this here. You got to either get on board or we will throw your ass out.
Yeah, I think the Bucks have a really good locker room, really good culture. Obviously, it's a different team than when they won the Super Bowl a few years ago. But there are still some players left from that team. Tristan Wirfs, Chris Godwin, Antoine Winfield, Vita Vea. They know what it's supposed to look like. And they've taught that next generation. Kalijah Cansey, Luke Gedeke, all these guys have learned what the expectation is. And I think that'll continue with Capehart, and especially with this group of rookies he's coming in with. I mean, Reuben Bain is not going to tolerate messing around. That guy is all business. He's all about winning. He's all about playing football. So if you're not doing the things you're supposed to be doing, there are players in that room who will hold him accountable. Especially a player like this who, he's like the sixth man on that defensive line. He has to fight. He has to earn everything as a fifth round pick. So I think all of that plays into that fire, that desire to do everything he needs to do to earn his place in this league. He's coming in as a 25-year-old rookie who was drafted on day three. He has everything to prove.
With their last fifth round pick, it was Billy Schroff, the offensive guard from Notre Dame. Again, it's not one of the sexy things, but as I've always been told by the draft professor yourself, big guys win championships. You've got to build through the offensive line. So is Schroff a guy that could at least be a depth piece? Do you see him as a potential starter down the road? Like, if you were Tampa Bay, was this a guy that you're just going, all right, there'll be an upgrade of what we had last year when everything went to hell in the handbasket with the offensive line?
Yeah, definitely needed to add depth on the interior. Starting Michael Jordan at guard was a rough experience.
Oh,
So this is desperately needed depth. And I like the player. He's strong. He can get push at the point of attack. He's not a premier athlete, but he's a good enough athlete to do the things you're going to ask him to do. Uh, Went to big time program, played multiple years, high success level. The big thing with him was injury, and you're a depth player, not going to be on the field all the time. So just being that safety net, I think, kind of nullifies that a little bit. Obviously, you don't want your backup getting hurt too, because that puts you in a really bad spot. But I'm not as worried about my backup guard getting injured as I am, my starting guard getting injured. So I think getting him where they got him was good value. Again, I don't know if he was the ideal player I wanted. I think there was one other player who I would have liked more. But Trout is a good player. I like what he brings to the table as a depth piece.
Is he big enough to be an NFL guard? Like usually we look at guards and they're like 320, 330, built like, refrigerators that come to life. He's on the smaller side. He's around that 305, 310. So he's going to need to put weight on him. Again, it's no, you're not, doubting the intelligence and as you said, the technique. It's just, is he a good enough athlete and is he a powerful enough guy to play offensive line in an NFL where everybody's getting bigger, stronger, and faster?
I think he's definitely strong enough because he just absolutely pushes people around in college. And obviously the NFL is a different level, but that's where you got to start. If you're not pushing people around in college, you're definitely not doing it at the NFL. So I think he's got the requisite power to be successful in the NFL. You don't necessarily have to be 330 to be strong. As long as it's good weight, it's good muscle, you can be 310 and be just as powerful. So I don't have a lot of question marks in that area. Maybe a little bit with his quickness and his ability to redirect and pass pro. But I think the tools are fine. I think the size is fine. I think really if you have him on the field, then you should feel fairly comfortable in terms of what he is as a depth player.
Does he make the team? Do you think, or is he one of those guys you put in the practice squad?
I think he definitely makes the team. Um, Again, they brought back Dan Feeney, who they had last year. They got him off the Bills practice squad. Elijah Klein, the backup center, even with all the offensive line injuries, he was never activated. So the Bucs were paper thin on the interior of the offensive line in terms of depth. So this is a necessary addition. I think he comes in, he's already the best interior depth piece they have above both those guys.
Well, with the final pick, which was probably a bit of a reach, because a lot of people are like, okay, why? Bauer Sharp, the tight end, who went from southeastern Louisiana to then Oklahoma to LSU, and he's never been one of those guys who's put up numbers. So again, is this one of those projects you're looking at going, we can fix him? The dreaded words you hate in the NFL, where even you, Jeff, are like, don't say that we can fix him. You got to say those words. We can fix him. So can they fix him? Can they make him into a good pass catching tight end or a blocking tight end?
I do I do see the pathway for him being a good blocking center. And this is someone I had to go back and watch. He wasn't someone I originally watched going into it. He's someone I had to go back and do my homework after the fact. But, going back and watching him, I liked the athletic tools. I think he's got the good movement ability. I do think he has the good blocking. I think he could be a good blocker in the NFL. And especially when you look at who he's going to be competing with in that Bucs tight end room. You've got K. Dotton, who's your established starter, and you've got Keith, who's kind of that all blocking fullback slash tight end. And after that, it's Payne Durham, who is tall and unathletic and not a great blocker, not a great pass catcher. And then Devin Culp, who is a terrible blocker. He's really fast, but he just can't get on the field. He's not a very good football player. He's just a good athlete. So I think that third tight end job is wide open. And if Sharp can come in and be a quality blocker and a quality athlete, even if it's just like dump off stuff as a pass catcher, it's a backside rollout. You flip it to the flat and you can run 10, 15 yards. I think that's already a huge upgrade on what they have. So he's a depth player. He's a role player. He hasn't been playing tight end long, so I do think his best football at the position is still ahead of him. I just think, yes, they can fix him. They can develop him. I think he can be better than what they have. even though he's going to be a depth player his career.
How tough is it for you scouting tight ends sometimes when the college game still hasn't embraced it like the NFL? Like we've seen, whether it's Kittles, whether it's Jake Laporta, Travis Kelsey, Bowers, they take off. I mean, NFL quarterbacks look at tight ends and go, "You were my best friend. We were going to hang out together. Hey, you're even closer to my number one wide receiver." That guy's a diva. I can't stand him. With college tight ends, they're still like, "Yeah, we'll throw you the ball maybe two or three times, unless you're Kenyon Sadiq, and they still only maybe throw it four or five times." So when you were scouting him, how tough is it trying to figure out is his, again, as you said, is his best football ahead of him, and just a college game hasn't figured out how to use tight ends, or is he really just this raw? It's going to take a lot of work.
It can be tough because you watch a guy like Oscar Delp from Georgia, and you see, okay, this is a good blocker, this is a good athlete. Why does he only get like 10 catches a year? And you're not really sure why. You think, okay, I think he's going to be more than what he was at the college level once he gets to the pros. But he just was never utilizing that. I mean, I think people thought the same thing about OJ Howard when he came out. Like, wow, this guy's a mauling blocker. He's a great athlete. He can stretch the field vertically. And then it just never panned out for him. He's never a featured part of the offense, and we know why now. So it is a challenge because guys like Brock Bowers are rare. Yeah, you don't see a lot of them. I think what you just have to look at what they can do and say, will this work in the NFL? Sam Laporta, people didn't think he was a great blocker coming out of college a couple of years ago. But, he got to the second level pretty well. He can move pretty well. So, can he do that in the NFL? Can he be a good, space blocker at the professional level? And it turns out, yes, he can. He did it well in college. He did it well in the NFL. Um, so it is a little bit of a guessing game because they're not featured. Their roles can be limited at times. But you look at what they can do and say, can I use this? Can I utilize this skill set? And if you can, you take it and you run with it.
So now that we've had time to decompress, and I mean, you looked at the Buccaneers draft. Would you have done anything different? Like, would you have invested more in the offensive line earlier? Would you have maybe taken a wide receiver in the second round, whether it's a Chris Brazzle or even a Skylar Bell, and then gone linebacker in the third? I mean, like when you look back, I know they haven't even played yet, but there's still second guessing. Like, was there any picks that you still love the player, but you thought, oh, we should have done, maybe should have gotten this position first rather than this position?
I probably wouldn't have been too different in what I would have done. Maybe you can trade back a little bit and still get Jeremiah or Josiah Trotter in the second round, but then you're taking a risk. And if you don't get him, who are you getting at linebacker? I liked Jake Golday a lot, but I know the Bucs didn't. So, I get taking him where they took him.
Now, why was that? Why was Golday not the guy that they loved? Was it just scheme fit, or was it an athletic thing, or?
I'm told it's because he was a little bit more of a project, not having played a ton of true off-ball linebacker, being a hang linebacker a lot of the time in Cincinnati, being a pass rusher at a lower level. He just doesn't have the experience at middle linebacker that they were looking for, and they didn't want to wait to develop him, I don't think. So Trotter is just more of a plug and play guy, which I think was appealing to them.
So before we'll move on to a different topic, is it safe to say that this draft shows that Todd Bowles is more safe than what people give him credit for? Because people always say, "Oh, this might be his final year," and you look at the defense, like, but yeah, Bain is, anybody would have taken him, but Jeremiah Trotter, Josiah Trotter was, that feels like a Todd Bowles linebacker where plug and play. I don't have to do a lot. I don't have to, really develop him. I can just count on him. Keionte Scott, same thing. He is my kind of guy. His zone cover, aggressive as hell, street fighter. Like when you look at this draft, how much did you look and go, yeah, Todd Bowles had a lot of input, and he's probably still safe unless something really bad, happens.
I don't know that it indicates that he's safe necessarily. I think the defense desperately needed a facelift. They needed an injection of young talent. And if you have a defensive minded coach, you want to give them all the tools to be successful. Um, After last year, things did not go well. I don't think the coaching staff adjusted well to some things. As the team got healthier down the stretch, it felt like they played worse. So that was a failure on Todd Bowles, and I don't think there's any other way to slice that. So ownership, they love Todd Bowles. They wanted to give him another chance. They wanted to let him fix the problems that came up. And if you're going to bring him back for another year, give him one more chance. You want to have him have all the tools he needs to be successful. And I think that's what this was, giving him every opportunity to succeed. Now, if he doesn't succeed, I do think he will be fired at the end of this year. This team is too talented not to be contending for playoff position, not to be contending in the NFC. So if they fall short, I do think that's going to be it for Todd. But they want to give him every opportunity to succeed.
All right, so here's your schedule, Bucks fans. If the schedule dropped and some people are like, yes, this looks, hey, we could go, 12-5, or someone like, oh, this might be another 8-9 season. There's some who were even like, oh, this might be really horrible here. That November, December is kind of a killer. So let's get your take on it here. So when you look at the schedule, is it oh we're going to playoffs, or is it let's wait and see? This could be good, or it could be this could be a rocky road.
I was writing up the five hardest games and the five easiest games on the Bucks schedule today. And really, I don't think there's a ton of difference between those two levels. I think there aren't a lot of pushovers on the schedule. I mean, yeah, there's the Browns who are no good. The Saints have been no good in recent years. Getting the Bengals early, that's always a positive thing. But most of these lower tier teams that they'll play are the Packers or the Lions or the Chargers. I mean, those are good teams, and their higher teams are the Rams and the Bears. So those are good teams too. So I mean, you're not getting any worse than the Steelers, and that's a fringe playoff team every year. So I think it is a formidable schedule, but I also look at all of these teams and say, are they better than the Bucks? Are the Cowboys better than the Bucks? Are the Panthers better than the Bucks? Are the Falcons better than the Bucks? And I think to myself, no, I don't think they are necessarily. So I think this is going to be a game, a schedule with some ups and downs. I think they'll probably drop a game you think they should win. They win.
All in all, I think this is a pretty reasonable schedule, and I think it's going to be, towards that 10, 11, 12 win mark. So I think it's something that they should be able to navigate pretty well.
I want to touch on the let's call it a very early sort of this could be a little bit tricky schedule, which is you get the Vikings, Packers, and then the Cowboys on a short weekend on Amazon Prime. Again, pie in the sky, they could be going into Dallas 4-0 because, again, the Bengals never seem to really get it together those first, week, 2 weeks. The Browns, well, their quarterback room is a mess. Vikings, their quarterback room is a mess. And the Packers are breaking in a bunch of new players, and it's basically at home and not at Green Bay. So how big is that October 8th game? And do you trust the coaching staff this year to go, okay, really need to get this locked down on short notice, not just show up on a Thursday, be half prepared, and then get our doors blown off?
Yeah, I think that October 8th game will be really exciting because I do think there's a decent chance the Bucks could be 4-0 going into that game. Like you mentioned, Bengals are typically a slow starter. Browns are a mess. I think getting the Vikings early helps as they're breaking in a new quarterback, Kyler Murray, still building some chemistry there. Getting the Packers early helps because Micah Parsons could be starting the year on the pup list. He might not even be available for that week 4 game. So I think things set up for what could be a heavyweight showdown. I mean, Dallas is always going to get the spotlight, and if the Bucks are 4-0, they're going to get a lot of shine in that game too. So these are teams who I think will be fighting for the playoffs, Dallas and Tampa. This could potentially be a tiebreaker kind of game when you come to the wild card at the end of the year. But I think the Bucks are also very capable of winning their division. So would it be great to win this game? Absolutely. I think this is a great time to showcase Baker Mayfield and Bucky Irving and the new defense and Reuben Bain and all these exciting young players you have. But I don't think it's a make or break game by any means either.
They missed the playoffs, and yet they still get three primetime games. They get an Amazon Prime game October 8th. There'll be Sunday Night Football November 8th against the Bears, and then November 30th, a Monday Night Football game against the Carolina Panthers. Are you surprised about that? But even though it was a down year, the NFL is still going, hey, we're gonna still gonna put you on prime time. We're still, putting you again, in some nice matchups and not just send you to like the Phantom Zone.
Honestly, I'm surprised they don't have more primetime games because this is one of the best rosters in the NFL. And we know last year was a disappointing year. Tons of injuries. Now, there might not have been a more injured team in the NFL last year. I think San Francisco, Detroit, Tampa, very, very banged up all season. But you look at this roster, the offensive line is one of the best in the NFL. Baker Mayfield is always a draw. Buka was in contention for Rookie of the Year most of the year. Bucky Irving's a very exciting player. Reuben Bain seems like he was the steal of the draft. There's a lot of exciting pieces on this team and a team that you expect to be contending for the playoffs. Why not feature a game against Baltimore, who's always a contender, a game against Detroit, who's one of the best teams in the NFC, a game against the Rams, who could be, a playoff preview going into the playoffs. So I'm not surprised they got three. I'm a little surprised they didn't get more, to be honest.
I know the players and coaches are happy. I know the Glazers probably aren't. Are you? What is your take? But they did not get sent to an international game because the Glazers like to have a global brand. They have they have Manchester United. They still want to take the Bucks overseas. And are you surprised they didn't get their wish this year?
You know, I'm not surprised. I think it's been a little bit since they've had an international game. I think they went to Germany 3 or 4 years ago. So it has been a little while since they've gone international. So in that way, it's surprising. But, honestly, I could take or leave the international games. They don't move the needle for me. I like it when it's 9 a.m. and I'm going to change the laundry on a Sunday morning and I look at my phone, I'm like, oh yeah, football's on. So that's cool. But, if it's my team playing in it, it's really, it doesn't do anything for me. Um, yes, in some ways, it's a prime time game. They get the spotlight, the only game on TV, but a lot of people are still sleeping at that time. So, you're either rolling out of bed at halftime or you're going to church. So, really, it doesn't highlight the players and the team as much as you might want it to. So, I'm sure ownership is probably disappointed, but I'm fine with not having an international game. I'd prefer not having the travel and the wear and tear and the distraction.
Finally, we got to talk schedule release video. And yes, nothing says schedule release like three men who are a bit, let's say, chunky, doing a Baywatch, montage. Jeff, I know you probably had input into this. Like, hey, you know what? Screw the Baywatch babes. That's too controversial. Let's get Bert Kreischer and just give him a script and let him just be Bert Kreischer along with two redheads, males, not females. So, what was your take on this? Did you like it? And how much credit should we give the Bucks for being a bit creative and letting the players sort of be themselves?
I think it's funny. I love it, a couple of fat dudes on the beach doing a Baywatch spoof. I mean, that's funny to me. I love that kind of thing. Uh, they were goofing on other, people at the beach and they were representing other teams. I thought it was clever. I thought it was unique. I thought it was one of the better release videos out there. It might be the best one out there if it weren't for that Colt Simpsons video. That was super funny. I loved that one. But what's not to love about 320 pounds of Cody Mock flipping his red hair in the ocean. That's that's just good fun right there.
It's funny. I know during the Super Bowl era, this team had more seriousness and still characters, but more of I'd say almost edge. How is this team? I mean, because it seems like you have a lot of players who they're talented, but they're still trying to fight a stigma. Whether it's Baker Mayfield trying to show, yes, I am a legit top 10 quarterback, not as they call up here in New England, a zombie quarterback. Yes, you were horrible. You should stay horrible. Why are you now good? There's still a lot of the offensive line you sort of know, but don't know. Emeka Buka, for as great as he was, we still don't, maybe think of him as a top 10 wide receiver. Like, what is, I guess, the attitude of his team and sort of the personality when, as I said, it's very talented. It's still like, well, who the hell are these guys?
This team is a really close-knit group. They're a little bit goofy. You'll see, 5, 10 players at the Rays game, chugging beers. I think the entire offensive line was riding the Lightning Zamboni in the playoffs. So they're very active in the community. They do a lot of stuff together. They're all having fun. I know Tristan Wirfs was in like a hot dog eating contest a couple weeks ago. So they like to cut loose. They like to have fun, just hanging with the guys. But they also really embrace that underdog mentality, and that comes from Baker Mayfield. Tampa, it's a market that's often overlooked. Like I know I was looking at a top 10 GM rankings in the NFL, and Jason Light wasn't on it, and he's one of the 5 best GMs in the league. So that's a team that's always overlooked, whether it's Mike Evans, Levante David, who's only went to like one Pro Bowl in his Hall of Fame career. Then they embrace that because that's Baker Mayfield's personality. He's always looking to be the underdog, disrespected, and they all feed off that. So it's a goofy group, it's a close group, but it's also a group that if you count them out, they're gonna thrive on that.
All right, so final prediction before we talk to you in August. What is your gut feeling tell you right now? Mini camp hasn't happened yet. OTAs haven't happened yet, but I can tell Jeff, you're like, this might be the year. I won't jinx it. This might be a good year. So, what is your gut telling you right now for 2026 and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Right now, there are still unanswered questions with Zach Robinson, a new offensive coordinator. I think he's going to be an upgrade, but I'm a little bit hesitant to dive in with both feet until I see what he puts out on the field. So right here and right now, I'm going to say 11-6. And I think they do win the NFC South, and I think they are a dangerous team who can win the NFC this year. I don't think any team outside of the Rams is clear-cut better than the Buccaneers roster. So I think they're going to be right in the mix to go to the Super Bowl and be a contender this year. I feel really confident with what they do. And if Zach Robinson goes back to that Liam Cohen style offense that we saw 2 years ago, I really think the sky's the limit for this group because they're super talented.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I give you Buccaneers draft analyst, guru, and an all-round fan slash critic. I'll give you JT Jeff Olson. So, Jeff, before I let you go, where can fans check you out at? Where is the YouTube channel, Twitter, the website? Where can fans check? I know you're already working on your 2027 draft board going, all right, yeah. 5 quarterbacks in the first round, 4 wide receivers. I got 2 tackles in the top 10. So, where can fans check out your work at?
Yeah, so all my Buccaneers written content is at bucksreport.com. I do a podcast through them. You can find it on YouTube. It's called the Creamsicle Chronicle Podcast. I also do draft coverage with the draft professors on Monday and Friday nights. Right now, we're doing summer scouting for the Big 12 and SEC. So that's where I'm probably most active right now as we're kind of heading into the dead months of the off season. And then you can always find me on the Twitter at Icewater Olson.
Jeff Olson, ladies and gentlemen, once again, always on a pleasure having you on the show. We come back. We got a lot more going on here, only on it's Last Call. Last Call, the alcohol, only on the Last Call podcast.com.